Hello, I'm Layne Hartsell with the Korea IT Times, and I'm here with Mandar Apte from Mumbai, India, who has been working with, or who is the Director of Cities for Peace and been working in the streets and in the cities with youth, with police, with many people trying to address violence and nonviolence. And he's here with me today. Welcome, Mandar.
Thank you, Layne. It's been great knowing you over the few years, and let's see what the conversation unfolds. The world needs such conversations to happen because we are in a very, what can I say, civilizationally challenged space as a human race.
Yes. Well, let's start off a little bit about your background. Around 30 years ago, you went to the United States for your graduate studies. How about if we start there and then go with how this unfolds to you working in places like the Watts neighborhood in LA?
Yeah, so I grew up in India. I grew up in Mumbai, India, which is on the west coast, and I used to read the Hardy Boys when I used to grow up, and I was fascinated by Frank and Joe Hardy. I really felt I want to meet them, and I wanted to have a career like them, like solving mysteries and fighting injustice and putting bad guys in prison. Like all this is what inspired me in my 8th, 9th, 10th grade. So I was good in school. I got a scholarship to go to the United States for my graduate studies, and I landed in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in the buckle of the Bible Belt, as they call it. And I was in for a big reverse culture shock because here in India we were growing up watching CNN, Baywatch, all these kind of American shows, and here I am in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So those were the formative days, but then it's my home away from home, and my research was sponsored by about 30 oil companies from all over the world. So my Christmas holiday before I graduated was in Amsterdam. And so I chose the offer to work for Shell because I thought, okay, one day I might go and work. I would love to work in Amsterdam. So I joined Shell in Houston in 1999, just before the Y2K panic had hit the world. And I stayed in the belly of the beast for 18 years. I was a petroleum engineer, traveled worldwide in many offshore deep water projects in Nigeria, in New Zealand, Brazil, Aberdeen. But then stress hit me, and I ended up taking a workshop on yoga and meditation in Houston, of all places. And my teachers were a white American couple. And they were teaching me all these, breathing exercises and pranayama practices and live in the present moment philosophies. And I thought like I should have known this in India.
Right.
But nobody had taught me. Like that was not part of my education. So 2004 is when I committed myself that, okay, my stress is actually because of the people that work with me. And I need to bring this inner peace to the workplace. So that is where actually my activism actually started. I was at the research lab of this Fortune 100 company with all like PhDs, but they were emotionally hollow. And so that is where I started in 2004 teaching meditation practice at the Shell Research Lab in Houston. 20 years ago. So this was long time before the mindfulness craze has hit America. So yeah, that's a little bit about my life.
And so, of course, meditation is a long millennial practice in India, and you didn't get this growing up, which is interesting. I didn't know that about you actually, and we've had a lot of conversations. You picked this up in the United States, and then that kind of started to direct you into a more inner journey. Started to look around you and see what kind of effects it was having. At what point did it come to you to begin to address, say, violence, uh, outwardly in what's going on in society? So you have your inner transformation going on. When did you get to this point?
Actually, it's like you're going through a life of seemingly privilege, right? You're working for Shell, you're traveling business class, you are traveling all over the world, staying in Marriott five-star hotels. But I had a very bad divorce. I went through a very bad relationship crisis. So
Uh-huh.
that is what deepened my resolve that I need to heal myself. I need to work on myself. It's similar to like brushing your teeth every day. You don't do it. You don't not brush your teeth every day because what will people think about you? You'll have bad breath, and you will have dental decay, right? So you do it for your own sake. So that is where I felt like my mental hygiene is also my responsibility.
Right.
I need to show up better at the workplace, in my personal life and professional life, and I need to do it for my own well-being also.
Mhm.
So that was also dealing with violence of some proportions, right?
Sure.
So that's where I started thinking about violence and all its flavors. So violence happens at three levels. The first obvious level is in action, like okay, you see somebody hitting at somebody, or terrorism, or it could even be writing a nasty email and pressing the send button, right? So that's the first level of violence. It's at the level of action. The second level of violence is at the level of your speech, what you speak. By speaking harsh words, you might actually hurt somebody. And the third level of violence, which is even more subtle, is about feelings, thoughts, and emotions.
Mhm.
So that is where, it all begins. Like violence in action, violence in words begins in violence at the level of the thoughts.
Mhm.
So that is where I started connecting the dots that, okay, yoga meditative practices for your inner well being can actually be helpful in reducing violence in families, in your own life, and in the world. When I made that connect, I stepped out of my comfort zone, and this was in 2009. And I had read in the newspaper in Houston that veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan war were going through post-trauma stress disorder. At that time, it was called PTSD.
Yeah.
And there were many suicides of these American soldiers that were sent on that, weapons of mass destruction narrative war. And I felt like let me see if I can share this wisdom of inner peace healing with a demographic that is in need of it. And so in my evenings and weekends, I used to go to the Houston VA, I go to the American Legion, and I used to teach pranayama meditation practices
Mhm.
to these soldiers that are coming back from OIF and OEF missions. And that was a very transformative time in my personal life also. I was going through stuff and I was discovering this that, oh, wow, these practices are helpful to me.
Mhm.
And that is where that activism also reached that, okay, let me see if I can go into these spaces where, I can offer something to them. So that was 2009, 2010. That is when I started making the connect that, okay, violence can also lead you to hurt yourself,
Yeah.
because that's what they were doing. They were not able to manage their emotions. The trauma had already happened, and they were not able to deal with the civilian life that they were now integrating into. So that was another example of, applying the wisdom of inner peace to reduce violence, to give these soldiers some tools that were not tactical tools, but they were inner management tools, so that is the connection I made in 2009, 2010.
Mhm.
And that journey deepened. So I started in 2016 is when I started thinking about the violence in America, which is where I got a new life. And it was very disturbing for me to see mass shootings in schools, domestic abuse, homicides, and children taking their life due to drugs. Like all these things were, for me, preventable. You could
Mhm.
prevent this, and that is where I started, contemplating on this violence as a public health crisis.
How did you go from uh, an inner practice to this outer practice? I mean, does it does it matter that we have an outer practice? I guess I should say in society.
See, most of the times, Layne, we don't talk about what is happening in your inner world, right? So, for example, you work on a team, people come, they work together, and let's say if something goes wrong, if you don't get the results that you expect, then we come together and we brainstorm. Okay, what went wrong?
Mhm.
What went wrong? And when we do post-its on the wall and say what can we do, then we look at where can we improve. So then we look at the processes that lead you to bad results,
Mhm.
right? And then we do like, okay, performance improvement. Okay, can we improve the processes? Can we fix certain things? The blind spot is we never go into the dimension of, is everybody on my team okay?
Right.
you know is everybody okay? We just, in America, we just say, hey, how's it going? We are not even waiting for an answer, like, okay, how is it going?
Mhm.
So that is where again I felt like, okay, we need to care for each other, right? And I was going through my own personal stuff. So that is where I started realizing that maybe we have a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde syndrome. We do not try to be a full human being. We are just living in compartments.
Right.
And so that is where the outer world, which consists of only three things, right? Layne. It consists of people in your life, situations in your life, and the objects in your life, whether it's animate object or an inanimate object.
Mhm.
These are the three things in your outer world: people, situations, and objects. There is no fourth thing. What happens is usually the outer world, we allow it to impact our inner world,
Mhm.
right? People in our life may not be the best people. So somebody insults you, somebody makes you feel guilty. Situation in your life may not be the most ideal, like you're stuck in a traffic jam, or you're going through a divorce, or you're going through a hurricane, right? So these things usually shake the inner world. We are kind of destabilized,
Right.
and it depends on your coping mechanism. It depends on the sheets that you have, the protective layer that you have, maybe your friends, your ecosystem. If you don't have any of these coping mechanisms, then you get into this trap. I call it a trap because it's, you either hurt yourself or you hurt somebody else. You hurt
Mhm.
yourself or you hurt somebody else. So what has happened is a good person, you, has been transformed into somebody who is not able to cope their inner world based on the chaos in that outer world of people, situation, objects. And it has changed your personality. You have become violent. And it
Mhm.
could be subtle levels of violence, right? Doesn't have to be going and punching somebody. It could be subtle levels of violence in
Mhm.
speech or in thoughts and feelings. So that's where the link between that inner world and outer world is an obvious link, because all your decisions, whether you are a leader, a mother, a teacher, a nurse, it is coming from an internal world. It depends on how you have slept last night. If you haven't slept last night, you'll be groggy,
Right.
angry, frustrated, and no wonder you'll pass on that frustration to somebody else. Unless you know how to break it and say, okay, I'm not going to let my frustration impact my behavior. Now,
Right.
that is where all of this becomes a personal choice, and that's why we don't talk about it at the workplace. We do not talk about it at the workplace because who are you to ask me how I deal with my frustration?
I see.
Right? And that is where we have to be very skillful. We have to, I think we have to educate people. We have to educate people that they have a choice. They have a choice when a negative emotion comes. Number one, acknowledge it. Yeah. Most people don't even know that they are in a negative emotion. And number two, there is a healthy way of coping with it or deleting it. It doesn't have to be drugs. It doesn't have to be go to the bar and drink. It doesn't have to be go and abuse your wife or partner. Right? But behind that activity, unhealthy activity, you can call it violent activity, is a preventable science. It's a preventable public health issue that you can give people the tools to overcome their negative emotions. That is the link between the breath and emotions. Like
And
every emotion has a corresponding breathing pattern. Like when somebody gets angry, when somebody is sad, we sigh. When somebody gets anxiety or depression, you will notice the breathing pattern immediately changes. It's a different breathing pattern. So this is the science that emotions have their own breathing patterns. And through education, we can give people education on how to use their breath to manage their own negative emotion, exactly like the toothbrush analogy.
I see. So you're talking about going really deep into our own emotional situation, trauma, things that we have happen, and then you're going to put this out into the world. Like you've developed your own model for dealing with this, and you've gone to some of the most, what I would say, violent places, the most needy places, I would say, in the United States. Of course, I want to thank you for that because I'm from the U.S. Um, can you talk about this? I know you've seen a lot of bad stuff, and you've seen a lot of good stuff come out of it too. Can you share some of that with me, as much as you'd like? And
Sure. Sure. My transformative moment came in 2017 when accidentally I turned from a shell petroleum engineer into a documentary filmmaker. So it was an accidental journey. I was reading Dr. King's autobiography, and in it, he has described a 5-week journey to India that he had made that I did not know anything about, even while I was growing in India. And Gandhi was dead. So Martin Luther King, when he went to India as a young man, did not meet Gandhi, but he came back with the message of Gandhi.
right, he met Nehru and discussed.
Right. So he met several people who were followers of Gandhi, but Gandhi had died before MLK came. So that day I felt something must have happened here. This man is saying in his autobiography, the first sentence in his India chapter, to any other country, I would go as a tourist. Here, I had come as a pilgrim. So that feeling in my heart was something happened here for him that shifted his way of looking at the world. And he brought that message of nonviolence to his people. Because as you know, nonviolence was the cornerstone of the civil rights movement. And so that is the accidental discovery at a Barnes and Noble while I'm reading his autobiography.
I see.
And in 1 month from that day, I had ended up producing my film. Okay, so
I
it
see.
was, I can't even say it's my film because nobody produces a documentary film in 1 month. In the film, I focused on taking victims and survivors and perpetrators of violence because I thought my film should not be about the gun because it's a very divisive, polarizing issue in the United States. So I want people on both sides of the gun.
Mhm.
Gang members who have used weapons and survivors who have lost their loved ones in gun violence incidents. And I hosted them in India for 10 days, and that changed everybody's life, including my life.
Mhm.
So, having done this work while I was still working at Shell, I couldn't work at Shell anymore. I could not. After having spent these 10 days with these victims, survivors,
Yeah.
I took a commitment on myself, Layne, that, violence in America, at least in America, I can say for sure, can happen anytime.
Mhm.
It can happen anywhere, at a Starbucks, at a movie theater, at a mall, could happen anywhere. And it does not look at my skin color, it does not look at my bank balance, and it does not look at the zip code, the neighborhood that I live in. It does not. After it happens, we are sad. We feel, oh shit, like, oh no, another mass shooting,
Yeah.
another child. So we are all helpless. We feel helpless.
Mhm.
But we think that this will not happen in my child's school. Okay, that's the that's somehow the sad programming is we have been desensitized. We
Mhm.
have become immune. When this thought hit me, I felt, what am I doing about this?
Yeah.
And so that is my turning point in life is like, why do we wait for a violence to happen to invoke my own compassion? Why don't I go and promote compassion, peace, and non-violence? And that is where I felt, okay, where would this be the most needed?
Mhm.
So that's where a friend told me that, look at LA, South Central LA. And
One
so
of those
I just went there. I just
dangerous
went
places.
there and yeah, I went there. I even feel amazed at what I did myself. Like, okay, I had no experience living in these neighborhoods. I walked in these neighborhoods. I met with the leaders of these Bloods and Crips. And I told them exactly what I'm telling you is, violence at 3 levels, managing emotions through breath. Will you give me 5 minutes of your time, Andre? And these guys gave me the 5 minutes of their time. And so the pranayama practices that I taught, the breathing exercises that I taught them in those 5 minutes is how I won their hearts.
So, first of all, the Bloods and the Crips, who are these people?
Oh, I didn't know any of this before I went there. So,
Right, right. They're
so
gangs.
these are families of gangs. There are
Yeah.
many like sub layers to these gangs, and there are pockets where it's a Bloods neighborhood, but it's surrounded by a Crips neighborhood. Is all these are things that I learned.
Mhm.
Every street has a gang. Every street has their own norms and etiquettes, and you don't go wearing red color shoes and red color clothes in a Blood in a Crips neighborhood, etc., etc.
Yeah, yeah.
I did not know any of this freaking thing. I have no idea. I went with my innocence. I went with my heart that what am I doing? I want to test whether the inner peace wisdom that I have that has benefited me in my personal life, can I apply it to people who need it the most? And people who are whatever label criminals, I always feel they are just victims crying for help. Because at the spur of the moment, an emotion comes and you act on it, and you go to prison, and in prison you either repent or you are in revenge.
Or you get worse.
Yeah, so that's where I felt like, okay, let me see whether whatever I'm wanting to do, whether these guys who have seen the dark side of life, will they appreciate it? And second step, can I inspire them to become an ambassador of peace? Can I do a train the trainer program and teach them how to teach these inner peace and healing exercises? Because they never got this education in their childhood. So, can they become a lighthouse for their neighborhoods? And that is where I felt so much contentment. I felt so much contentment because, whatever we call them, deadly criminals, actually, they are the sweetest people I have ever met in my life. They are more heartful than the CEOs and the shell executives that I have met. So, I feel blessed that they welcomed me in the neighborhoods, and I taught thousands of these people, including police officers, in the same room to test another theory. The another hypothesis was, okay, these are opposite groups, and usually people who are seemingly polarized, we don't come and talk and hang out with each other, right? Like Crips, Bloods, MS-13, LAPD cops, a victim of the gang violence. Like these are all various different stakeholder groups.
Right.
Can I bring them together and can I create a sense of belonging? That was my next level of, I would say, challenge that I took up on myself. And yeah, there
And
was
not
no
only
planning for this. Yeah,
not
it's
only
just,
this, you eventually took them to India along with other people who had experienced violence.
yeah. I took in to India. Every year I take two delegations to India before the pandemic. Well, I'm going to start now, so this could be a plug for your audience. If my work interests you, I do take two trips to India, and the trip that Layne you are referring to is my fourth trip, where I brought 17 police officers from different police departments in America and 17 black and brown people from different neighborhoods of America. So I had 34 pilgrims, and these are, as you know, community and police have a lot of tension in the United States. So that is where I felt I can be the bridge, or not even a bridge, a space that I can hold for those conversations to happen.
So of course, it's unfortunate that it is this, but you basically have the gang members and the police, both enemies, both they're sworn enemies in many cases, especially in some of the areas you've worked. You take them to India on a soul-seeking, a friendship-seeking pilgrimage. How did that turn out?
I mean, it's the most humbling thing I would say I've done in my adult life is to bring people who are these seemingly stakeholder polarized groups and to inspire them to come together in the spirit of healing themselves and in peace building, because that's the interest of every person on the planet. Like, who wouldn't want a peaceful neighborhood? Right? So now these people are opposites, and when they are 10,000 miles away from their own community into a culture that they have absolutely no knowledge about, right? So some people think India is still full of snakes and elephants, and
And people.
yeah. So I think that is where we have our own inhibitions, we have our own fears and biases. And so that is what we try to make people, number one, identify.
Mhm.
Number two, don't deny. And number two, see if you can find common ground.
Mhm.
Can you find a space where you agree to disagree? Because life is much more than just I disagree with you, right? Will you vote for Biden or Trump? That's just one thing. That's a choice. Let that not disturb my friendship with you. Because
Sure.
many of these polarizing topics, especially now in the age of social media and these deep fakes, you have no idea who's putting that social media message out there and
It's getting
what's
to be that way. Yeah, sure.
what's the business model for it, and you're allowing that to threaten your own friendship with your best friend or your spouse. I have seen that happen in the United States. So the purpose of these trips is to recalibrate your own leadership. What are you doing in your life? What else can be the purpose of your life? Are you here to promote anger, sadness, jealousy, frustration? No, then you are here to promote love, compassion, peace. So that requires you to build your own capacity. So these are leadership pilgrimages. These are of course not honeymoon trips. You are working on yourself, and that is the hardest work. It's not the work that we do outside. That's physical work. That's physical labor. The work that you have to do as a leader on yourself is the most hardest. Because as a leader, you are responsible. You have chosen to be a leader. That means you have a responsibility of the people that work for you, their families, and all this big ecosystem, right? So that is where I tell even my gang leader students that, you have a lot of influence. So watch out what you speak. Watch out the choices that you make in your life. Because there are people following you. They idolize you. They look up to you.
Right.
That is where, it needs to take a U-turn. You need to take a U-turn to look at, okay, who am I? What's the purpose of my life? So am I here to keep my anger? No, because it's raising your own blood pressure, your own stress. You might have a heart attack tomorrow, right? All these things are what we discuss, and we come to a point of agreement that we are here to live a good life and heal trauma in our neighborhoods and promote peace. Can we agree on that common agenda? That's a common agenda. So that's where you can, it's a shared humanity. We are all one race, human race. We are not different.
You're to finish up here. You said you're working on what you've been writing for 1 month, a script for a type of TV series. Can you talk about that? You're bringing this all together now, right?
Yeah, so I'm bringing two things together. One, I have brought delegations to India. About 100 leaders have come to me with me to India before the pandemic. And these have been mayors of cities, police chiefs, gang leaders, mothers and fathers who have lost their children in shootings. So it's a wide stakeholder group. And no matter where we go in India, because these people are, you can say, traumatized, when you expose them to another culture, another set of people, another set of activities, including food, music, festivals, something shifts. Something shifts, and that you can call that as a human drama, right? You transform. So that I have seen repeatedly in my trips. The second thing I'm trying to connect here is my peace building work in the various communities across the United States, Los Angeles, Minneapolis. We recently finished a program in Cyprus with the United Nations. I am currently doing a program in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Cape Town, right? So I am now looking at, can I make an interesting TV show, unscripted TV show, that inspires people to do the work I'm doing? And that's where we need to create human stories. We need to create human stories, and we need to invite people to become that peace builder, become that lighthouse, and not just wait. Don't wait for violence to happen. And violence can be anything. It doesn't have to be gangs. It could be suicide issue. Drug overdose, I heard, is a big problem now. Growing problem in Japan, in all these Southeast Asian countries. So yeah, anybody who is watching this, if you feel inspired by some of what I've been speaking, some of the videos that we can share in the links. I'm actually now invited also to Australia, since I have relocated from America to India. Australia has a domestic abuse crisis.
Oh, really? I didn't know.
So just this year, so in the last 4 months, every 4 days a woman has been murdered by a man. Okay, so now that's Australia. What? It's in the middle of nowhere.
Social fabric breaking down? Is it?
Yes, it's well, actually, fabric breaking down. It could be inability to manage emotions. COVID has left a lot of physical and mental scars. People may have lost their jobs. It could have a trigger effect. It could be refugees, immigrants. It could be all kinds of issues, right? But the bottom line is violence is on the rise. And we should not wait till it happens to us. We should proactively look at how do you promote peace and compassion in education, in police force, in leadership roles, right? That's, I think, where I'm driven. And thank you for your friendship, and thank you for this conversation.
Thank you. I'm Layne Hartsell. I've been speaking with Mandar Apte of Cities for Peace, and see you next time.